Chapter 444. At this moment, he was sitting in the study room with the map spread out and the sand table by his side. He Zhihai sat opposite him with a serious expression. The time that this prince has spent teaching you is neither short nor long. What do you want to say? Although Li Hongyuan was not relaxed, he was not in a hurry. He was quite confident that he could turn defeat into victory. After all, he had already done everything he could. If he could not change the situation in his previous life, it could only mean that Li Hongyuan's eyes darkened. To a certain extent, he could only allow General He to win this battle. He could not accept his defeat. Thinking about this, Li Hongyuan felt that he should do more. Although He Zhihai was a militant who liked martial arts and did not like brainpower, it did not mean that he was brainless. After all, his parents were there, so his innate qualities were not bad. In addition, during this period of time, Li Hongyuan spared no effort in teaching him. He was trained to the point that even if he was not in the Jin Qinhuang residence, He Zhihai would reflexively learn. When he encountered something, he would think about it subconsciously. In addition, when it came to war, he actually had a beast's instinct. At this moment, Li Hongyuan even displayed the approximate strength of the enemy. If He Zhihai did not have a good eye, then Li Hongyuan would not have trained him from the beginning. After all, there must be value in training him. Obviously, He Zhihai did not disappoint Li Hongyuan. In fact, he grew up in the border city and experienced countless battles. Even if he was not deliberately trained, it was impossible for him to be completely ignorant. Therefore, at this moment, he could naturally see that the northeast border was facing an unprecedented crisis. He Zhihai was also very familiar with the military strength of the Qi Yuan in the northeast border. It was said that there were 100,000 soldiers, but in reality, there were only about 70,000 soldiers. Compared to the entire Qi Yuan army, this was not considered a serious problem. After all, there were not many old, weak, sick, or disabled people in the Northeast Army. Even so, He Zhihai was still very worried. It was just that he did not show it. After that, He Zhihai emotionlessly described the situation at the northeast border and expressed his opinion. Although it was a dangerous situation, from He Zhihai's words, one could still see his confidence in the Northeast Army. Even if they couldn't achieve a complete victory in the end, it wouldn't be a problem to defend the northeast border city. However, this was not the case in Li Hongyuan's previous life. The Northeast Army was almost completely annihilated, the city was destroyed, and the tribal alliance continued to invade the south. This caused the Qi Yuan's Northeast Army to lose a lot of territory, and the He family only had He Zhihai left. What He Zhihai said was the same as what happened to the Northeast Army in Li Hongyuan's previous life. Obviously, the situation was completely different. Was it because He Zhihai was too arrogant, or was there some other reason? Li Hongyuan had always been inclined to the latter, and Li Hongyuan was most likely to be a traitor. Regarding this point, Li Hongyuan had also warned General He. As for the result, Li Hongyuan originally didn't want to ask too much about it, but now he probably still had to pay attention to it. After that, Li Hongyuan didn't hold back and told He Zhihai the facts of his previous life in a hypothetical way. Absolutely impossible. He Zhihai said with excitement and certainty. His voice unconsciously rose a lot, but after meeting Prince Jin's gaze, he inexplicably had an illusion that this was the truth. Ben Wang will only ask you, for such a situation to occur, where is the problem? During this period of time, He Zhihai could be considered to have witnessed Prince Jin's power. For example, this thing called a sand table, which created a large area of the northeast terrain, was even more detailed and accurate than what he remembered. This wasn't something that an ordinary person could do. Now, he didn't think that Prince Jin was joking, but rather that Prince Jin had discovered something that they didn't know and was reminding them. Wang Ye, this commoner requests to return to the northeast border. If there was really a problem with the Northeast Army, then no matter who it was, he must find the culprit and skin them alive. If it was the original He Zhihai, Prince Jin definitely wouldn't let him go. But now, the training was beginning to show results. A qualified general was someone who walked down from the battlefield and wasn't someone who only knew how to talk on paper. Therefore, he didn't mind him returning to the northeast. Moreover, the younger generation of the He family were all in the capital. If something happened, there was no need to worry about the He family line being cut off. What's more, Li Hongyuan wouldn't allow this kind of thing to happen. Li Hongyuan's finger gently tapped on the table. Your father should know. He Zhihai said, sure enough, in his heart, this commoner knows, but is somewhat uneasy. In that case, Ben Wang will send 2 people to follow you. He Zhihai rubbed his nose. What, was he so uneasy? As Wang Ye instructs. Set out immediately. Don't let Ben Wang hear your words of no contribution. Otherwise, bear the consequences. When He Zhihai heard this, his whole person subconsciously tensed up. Thinking about the hardships of this period, it was better to be obedient. He Zhihai had no official position and was a commoner. If he wanted to leave the capital, it was very easy. Basically, he didn't even need to say goodbye. Just prepare some things, mount a horse and leave. After seeing He Zhihai's skill, if he left at this time, Lu Qingdi wouldn't have any objections. Instead, he would feel gratified. Without saying anything, he turned around and gave him a reward. Not only were there substantial benefits such as gold and silver, but he was also directly promoted to the 5th rank. The He family received the reward, but there was no sadness or joy. Chapter 445. The He family received the reward, but there was no sadness or joy. The younger generation of the He family, when they were just a few years old, they already knew what life and death was. They were used to seeing blood, not to mention old Madam He, Furan He, and the daughter-in-law of the He family below them. Who hadn't seen the cruelty of the battlefield? Thus, who would care about those worldly possessions? Gold and silver, if they had it, they would keep it and use it. If they didn't have it, they would never force it. As for the position of an official, since the commander-in-chief was one of their own, they didn't need to worry about encountering that kind of brainless general, so it didn't matter. Therefore, they cared more about the lives of their own family members and the soldiers at the border. They hoped that everyone would be able to live well. But even if it was like this, they wouldn't stop their own children from going to the border. Because that was their mission. As long as they didn't lose an arm or a leg, and weren't so old that they couldn't move, they would persevere. However, the He family was indeed grateful to Jin Qin Wang, especially old Madam He and Furan He, who were the clearest about the changes in He Hai's consciousness. At this moment, no matter what purpose Jin Qin Wang had, they would remain silent. In the future, even if Jin Qin Wang did something that they couldn't accept, they could choose not to participate, but they would acquiesce to He Hai's help. Even if He Hai had to be removed from the family, what Li Hongyuan gave to He Hai, from a certain point of view, was another life. He Hai hurriedly rushed to the northeast border town, alternating between riding 2 horses. Both horses were almost crippled from running. Fortunately, he didn't see the tragic situation that he imagined. He breathed a sigh of relief. That, perhaps Jin Qin Wang's information was wrong? However, He Hai didn't jump to conclusions. This battle could only be considered as the beginning. If there really was a mole, it was most likely that the mole would strike a heavy blow at the crucial moment. Therefore, it was too early to be reassured. He Jinwei did not find the sudden appearance of his son strange. Instead, it was a matter of course. His son was messing around, but he truly cared about his family. If he had the ability, there was no reason for him to stay in his comfortable nest. As for the 2 strangers that He Jinwei brought with him, he did not care about them. No matter what their background was, they were related to the capital. However, General He was too lazy to pay attention to him. When it was time to fight, he would fight. At other times, it was best for him to be well behaved. Clearly, General He's impression of his son was still the same as before he left the capital. After all, judging from He Zhihai's words and actions, he was still that little tyrant. He Zhihai didn't care. He wasn't in a hurry to get involved in the matters between the generals. He gave people a deep-rooted impression that many people avoided him, but in fact, no general saw him as a threat. If he wanted to catch a mole, it was more convenient for him to act like this. Of course, he still had to communicate with his old man to see if he already had a suspect or even confirm the other party's identity. In He Zhihai's view, to be able to cause the situation that Wang spoke of, it definitely wasn't an ordinary citizen, nor an ordinary soldier. Because they didn't have the ability to know the overall deployment of the Northeast Army. Moreover, there were some places that they couldn't get close to, and there were some mountain passes that they couldn't open. Therefore, the scope was actually quite small. The idle little tyrant he led the two people to wander around the camp. Just like before, no one felt that something was wrong. Group after group of soldiers passed by in an orderly manner. When they saw He Zhihai, they would stop and call him Little General. This was a respectful title for He Zhihai. For those generals, He Zhihai was only awe-inspiring on the battlefield, but in the end, he was still a junior. These soldiers were different. They only knew that the little general was incomparably brave and invincible. They had the deepest feelings and regarded him as the person they revered the most. It wasn't that there weren't any generals who saw this situation. Most of them were still gratified and hoped that He Zhihai would grow up and become a commander like his father. Of course, there were also people who snorted disdainfully. A child whose hair hadn't even grown out yet. He only had martial strength but no brains. They secretly sighed in their hearts. There was nothing to be afraid of. If this kind of person wanted to scheme against him, it was really too easy. He Zhihai didn't know that he had already been defined as all brawn and no brains. After circling around, the people who shouldn't be missing weren't missing, so he didn't care anymore and went to make a sand table. In fact, this kind of sand table might have already existed. It was just that it was mostly made of rice grains and loose sand. Piling it up to have some meaning. Therefore, it wasn't widely spread. This time, he saw something different at Wang's place. It was practical, it was very necessary to make one. He Jinwei finally had a bit of free time and called that evil creature over. As a result, without waiting for General He to say anything, little tyrant He first rattled off a bunch of words. General He listened to his son's words and his expression was like a color palette. It was quite wonderful. In the end, his gaze became subtle and even suspected that this person wasn't his son. When He Zhihai finished speaking, he met his father's gaze and his face immediately darkened. "Old man, what's with that gaze of yours?" Little tyrant He who was serious for less than 3 seconds revealed his true colors. Instead, General He breathed a sigh of relief. This was right, this was how his stupid son should be. Once again, He Zhihai's face darkened. "Want to go against your superior, want to kill your father?" General He clenched his fist to cover his stupidity. He coughed and slightly restrained the expression on his face. Now, he knew what his Furan's letter meant. Wang was indeed powerful. The matter that he couldn't settle for more than 10 years was reversed by him in such a short time. It was even beginning to show results. It was just that, at the same time, he was gratified and a bit sour. These things should be put aside for the time being. First, they should exchange information to determine what to do next. Although He Zhihai had basically said what he wanted to say, General He was a bit absent-minded at the beginning and didn't hear very clearly. After hearing it again, his expression became serious. Although he had received Wang's reminder, he didn't think of the matter as serious. Now, it was different. The Northeast Army was destroyed and the He family was only left with a few kittens. What kind of concept was that? Just thinking about that scene, General, he completely couldn't control himself. The negative emotions that had been infected by the battlefield completely erupted at this moment. It was as if there were tens of thousands of wandering souls wandering around him. It was frightening and terrifying. A general's success was built on tens of thousands of bones. It definitely wasn't a joke. At this time, He Zhihai's eldest brother came in through the curtain of the tent. Seeing this scene, he was startled. "Dad, what happened?" Although his father was a military general, as long as he didn't go to the battlefield, he could basically be called a scholarly general. It was rare that he couldn't control his emotions. This was the first time he saw it. He Zhihai's elder brother was much more handsome compared to him, this little overlord. However, he was the #1 fierce general under He Zhihai in the Northeast Army. Moreover, his prestige was also quite high. He was General He's successor that everyone expected. He walked to He Zhihai's side. "Little brother, did you make Dad angry again?" He Zhihai's gaze was cold as he glanced at him. "In your eyes, Xiaoyi, is this unreliable?" Elder brother, he wanted to laugh, but because of General He's situation, he didn't laugh in the end. Fortunately, General He quickly controlled himself. "Boss, you came at the right time. Let's discuss this matter together. You guys can talk slowly. I'm leaving first." He Zhihai vowed to maintain his brainless image to the end. General He also knew that it was best for this evil creature to pay attention to this matter. Thus, he waved his hand like he was swatting a fly. Before He Zhihai walked out of the camp, he saw the smoke signal in the distance. Enemy attack, enemy attack. In the blink of an eye, the entire camp moved. The people in all the tents rushed out at their fastest speed and quickly gathered. What came one after another were the shouts of, "Hurry, hurry, hurry." He Zhihai immediately rushed to the horse pen and pulled out his other warhorse. The person in charge of raising the horse quickly put on the saddle and other things. It was said that He Zhihai had the intuition of a wild beast. It was equally applicable to his own warhorse. Whether his own horse was good or not, he would know after a casual walk. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible to do anything to He Zhihai's horse. A battle thus began. On the battlefield, shouts of killing shook the sky. Blood flowed freely. He Zhihai was still that invincible, crazy devil king, and the people behind him were always the fiercest and most active on the battlefield. Their blood seemed to be burning together with He Zhihai. However, if someone took a moment to take a look, they would find that He Zhihai had already used his brain to kill the enemy. He would no longer blindly charge forward without any care. He would also pay attention to the battle situation. There was no other way. This was deliberately trained by Jin Qinhuang. No matter how crazy he was, it seemed that there was always a thread holding him together. Whenever there was a gap, he would subconsciously think. He Zhihai himself was also aware of this point. He wiped his face. He couldn't play as fast as he wanted anymore. How miserable. This battle lasted for more than 4 shurchen. In the end, they were still unable to win and had to retreat. Although Qi Yuan won, the number of casualties was not small. Those were all human lives. The soldiers tiredly cleaned up the battlefield. Perhaps they were already numb. Even if they dragged along their brothers who had their arms around each other's shoulders, they were completely unable to cry. He Zhihai's body was excited, but his spirit was similarly not feeling well. Just from this battle, he could clearly feel that it was different from the past. Moreover, after this battle, he wouldn't have suffered this kind of injury in the past year. This kind of situation, no matter who saw it, would not feel good. He Zhihai wanted to go find his old man. However, at this time, he was most likely discussing matters with the other generals. He could only sullenly endure it. At one point, he wanted to bring people to kill them. In the end, he still had his reason and didn't do anything stupid. His elder brother came to find him. What's wrong? Are you unhappy? Big brother, why did you come? He Zhihai asked in a muffled voice. I knew that you would be unhappy. Pa let me come to see you. He Zhihai glanced at him. Do you think that I'm still 12 or 13 years old? If I'm unhappy, you bring people to kill them? Big brother, he smiled good-naturedly. Looking at his younger brother who was still young but already a little taller than him, it's good that you know your limits. Looking at the mottled battlefield, the trampled mud, the sporadic black and red snow, at this time, snowflakes floated in the sky. Looking at this situation, it wouldn't be long before everything would be covered again. Actually, the situation is already not bad. If we encountered this kind of situation in the past few years, the damage would increase by at least 50%. Can that little thing from the imperial court have such a big effect? That little thing from the imperial court is naturally far from enough. That little thing is just a cover. It's Jin Qin Wang. He Zhihai stared blankly, as if he didn't dare to believe it. If he originally revered Jin Qin Wang because of the other's military strength, then now, it had risen to a completely unimaginable height. It's not an exaggeration to say that Jin Qin Wang single-handedly saved the Northeast Army. The He family is loyal to the monarch and doesn't participate in the struggle for the throne between the princes. But this time, it's different. We owe too much. Jin Qin Wang is simply an open conspiracy within an open conspiracy. If he has a request, we simply can't refuse. Regarding this matter, father hasn't written a letter to mother and grandmother to know because he doesn't know how to write it. Originally, it was just me. Now, it's the entire He family? He Zhihai said indifferently. Xiao Hai has indeed grown up. Big brother, he was quite gratified. He Zhihai snorted. It's not that I want to say this, but in my opinion, there's no difference between being loyal to the monarch and being loyal to Jin Qin Wang. Big brother, he was startled. Xiao Hai, you mean, I didn't say anything. It's just that the facts are in front of us. Only by catching the traitor will we not let down our expectations. Big brother, he nodded. Regarding this matter, they stopped here. Speaking of which, I don't know what's wrong with the tribes of Mount True Nu. They've gathered so many soldiers. It makes people wonder if there's only the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled left in their tribe. It's a pity that the weather is too cold and the terrain doesn't allow for that. Otherwise, we would have taken a detour to their nest and taken them out in one fell swoop. No matter how valiant they are, they'll be useless. He Zhihai responded indifferently. His thoughts had already drifted to God knows where. However, regarding the matter of saving people, Li Hongyuan was really wronged. The He family was measuring the heart of a gentleman with the heart of a villain. Li Hongyuan wanted the throne, but he didn't pay attention to the soldiers guarding the borders and the various prefectures. In essence, he just wanted to protect He Zhihai and reduce the losses at the northeast border of Qiyuan. Everything else was secondary. Moreover, it was already the end of the 12th lunar month. Originally, the imperial brush should have been sealed when he turned 23. Luchengdi should have been able to relax and relax. However, because of the war in the northeast, he didn't dare to seal the imperial brush and delayed it until he was 27 or 28. Speaking of which, Luchengdi was indeed in a tragedy this year. He didn't go to the summer and couldn't rest in the winter. However, as the boss, if he didn't rest, his subordinates definitely had to accompany him. Fortunately, Luchengdi didn't go so far as to not rest during the 2 days of the new year. The courtiers also heaved a sigh of relief. Luchengdi worked hard, but they didn't have it easy either. It could even be said that they didn't fall behind. However, no matter how busy the imperial court was or how chaotic the war at the border was, it didn't affect the majority of the people in the capital. They did what they needed to do, whether it was indulging in a life of luxury or peace. Chapter 446. The first year she spent the new year in her husband's home, and also the first year she was the head of the household. The gifts that Jingwan sent back to her maternal home were so generous that she herself was a little embarrassed. If it was another family, they might think that she was emptying her husband's home to fill her maternal home. Who knows how they would arrange her? Of course, if it was another family, Jingwan would never do such a thing. However, in fact, Li Hongyuan didn't take it seriously at all. He even reminded Jingwan what she could add. Jingwan was speechless when she heard it. A certain person was clearly the master who never prepared gifts. He was purely blindly directing. If she listened to him, she didn't know what would happen. Jingwan let him stay where he was comfortable, as long as he didn't mind her emptying the storehouse. Li Hongyuan leaned on one side, supporting his head with one hand, incomparably comfortable. If you want to empty the storehouse of Jin Wangfu, Wan still needs a bit of effort, but also a bit of courage and guts. After all, there are a lot of things bestowed by the emperor inside. You're doing it on purpose, aren't you? Jingwan glared at him. Absolutely not. This husband is just thinking, Wan can convert the things inside and fill it with other things. Then there's no problem at all. Li Hongyuan had a bit of a smile. Jingwan thought that he was asking for praise. Then, Jingwan wanted to give him a slap. No problem. The problem was even bigger, okay. Any one of the things in the storehouse was priceless. If converted to other things, who knows how many mountains it would be piled up. It could bury the Luo family's residence and definitely create a scene in the capital. Then wait for the one on the throne to invite her and the Luo family to have tea. Even so, when the Luo family received the gifts, they were still speechless for a while. Originally, Madame Luo didn't take Jingwan's gifts seriously at all and always thought that she had a sense of propriety. But this time, it was more and more excessive. Madame Luo couldn't help but sigh. If Wan goes on like this, we don't even need to run the family business anymore. With just these, we can squander away for several generations. Luo Peishan was drinking tea at the side. When the second and third Yada comes back, you should tell her. Even if Jin Qinwang doesn't care, the Luo family cannot be raised to be lazy, thinking of reaping without sowing and taking the third Yatu to raise them as a matter of course. Our Luo family doesn't need to think about how many generations of glory, what glory to our ancestors. We can just go back and eat until our mountains are empty, and then wait for death. Old Madame Luo smiled. Things aren't that serious. You should have some confidence in your juniors. Luo Peishan snorted. That's right. The juniors that I taught definitely won't have any problems. I'm just afraid that those who weren't taught by me will have shallow eyelids. Regarding this point, Luo Darren still had some confidence. Old Madame Luo declined to comment. Since the gifts have already been sent, there's no reason to return them. Directly send people to deliver them to each branch. Speaking of which, the gifts for the others are more or less the same as before. It's just that there's more things for the winter. Additionally, there's an extra gift for younger uncle. Younger uncle should like it. Luo Peishan specially looked at the list of gifts prepared for Luo Peisong and was a little jealous. Third Yatu treats her granduncle better than me, her grandfather. I don't see these treasures in the gifts that she gave me. Old Madame Luo rolled her eyes at him. If these things were really given to you, would you really be happy from the bottom of your heart? I'm afraid that you'll be unhappy and say that Wan is deliberately mocking you. Luo Darren smiled embarrassedly. That, he was a scholar. That year, he was the Tanhua scholar and considered himself to be knowledgeable and multi-talented. Naturally, he liked the calligraphy and paintings of famous masters and most of the things that scholars liked. However, these were definitely not the things that pleased him the most. In comparison, things like flowers and plants were a notch better. It just so happened that Jingwan was very good at these things. Therefore, Luo Daren's inventory was actually quite a lot. Things were different, so it was naturally not easy to compare which one was more valuable. Comparing, in their respective fields, they naturally thought that the things that they loved were the priceless treasures. If you really like them, then tell Wan. Compared to the things that were prepared for younger uncle, Jin Qinwang wouldn't mind giving you another set, or even better. Old Madame Luo refused to give up and continued to ridicule him. At this time, the iron-toothed Luo Daren didn't dare to refute her back. Instead, he repeatedly begged for mercy. All kinds of lanterns were hung up and the word "Fu" was pasted everywhere. Even if all kinds of things were not going well this year, Lu Chengdi wrote more "Fu" characters. He probably wanted to use this festive occasion to suppress the previous bad luck. The Fu character that was sent to Jin Qinwang Fu didn't even pass through Jingwan's hands before it was taken by Muan to a certain place to paste it. It was obvious that he had been doing this for the past few years. It looked like he was pasting it in a very important place. However, Jingwan could feel the perfunctory attitude in this attitude. He completely didn't take this thing seriously. After becoming a member of the imperial family, on the night of New Year's Eve, she naturally had to enter the palace to have a reunion dinner with Lu Chengdi and the others. It would be lively, watch the fireworks, and then stay up late together to bid farewell to the old and welcome the new. Of course, before entering the palace, Jingwan, as the mistress of the household, received the frightening kowtows of the entire Wangfu. The servants' auspicious words were thrown out as if they didn't cost money. And Jingwan had money. Everyone worked hard this year and naturally was not stingy in terms of red envelopes. Everyone received at least 3 months and at most 1 year's worth of red envelopes. The people who received the rewards were very happy. Although there were rewards in previous years, but in comparison, at that time, the Wangfu was cold and cheerless. The masters were like this, so they, as servants, naturally couldn't be too lively. Moreover, the chief steward was strict and couldn't make any mistakes during the holidays. Therefore, in such a big Wangfu, there really wasn't any festive atmosphere. Even if they wanted to kowtow to their masters, they didn't have the chance. Now that there was a Wangfei, it was completely different. Wangfei not only rewarded them with money, she also let the kitchen reward them with a lot of food and allowed them to have a lively family reunion. As long as they did their own things well, there was no other hindrance. For a time, the people of Jin Qinwang Fu naturally admired Jingwan even more. In the way of ruling, one needed to have a balance between tension and relaxation. Everyone knew this point, but there weren't many who could really do it well. Li Hongyuan was an outstanding talent, but his tension was a little special. After tidying up, Jingwan followed Li Hongyuan into the palace. She didn't wear the gown of a Qinwang Fei. Jingwan was dressed in red and even used a whole set of ruby stone mask. Although she was young, there was no feeling that she couldn't suppress it. In the winter, she looked warm and cheerful. Her entire person became more and more radiant. Looking at his smiling wife, Li Hongyuan couldn't help but lean over and kiss her lips. Once wasn't enough, he kissed again until Jingwan reached out and covered his lips. "Don't make trouble, we still have to enter the palace in a while." If they really got angry, the consequences would be unthinkable. Li Hongyuan held her hand and didn't continue. Looking at his wife who seemed to be getting more and more beautiful, Li Hongyuan actually felt a sense of accomplishment. It should be known that the current Wan and the memory of his previous life were more and more distinct. Of course, the essence hadn't changed, which naturally made him happy. Chapter 447. Li Hongyuan lazily leaned back in his seat, holding Jingwan in his arms and playing with her fingers in boredom. Slender and fair, no matter how one looked at it, it was beautiful. Such a pair of hands, if it became rough and stained with blood and human lives, it would definitely be a great sin. In reality, if it was possible, no one would be willing to go to this step. But Jingwan's current state, wasn't it also very good? Blissful, cheerful, worry-free. It must be said that every time the sisters-in-law saw Jingwan, she was always radiant and seemed to be more dazzling each time. If one were to say that she was pretending for others to see, once or twice was still okay, but after a few more times, they would still think so. That was purely self-deceiving. Moreover, a truly good complexion, good condition, good spirit, how could it be covered with foundation? What's more, between her brows, no matter how one looked, they couldn't see the slightest bit of sadness. So to say, that fickle and beautiful living king of hell, unexpectedly changed his heart after marriage and only pampered Luo Shi? This was something that no one would have thought of. However, the truth was right in front of their eyes. Of course, this kind of situation wasn't something that everyone could accept. Others were good, but they weren't. The drop in their hearts was huge. How could their hearts not be sour? Luo Shi looked like a decent person, but in private, who knows how foxy she was. Didn't you see that Jean Qin Wang, this kind of veteran flower, fell into her hands? Just like how she looked gentle and generous, but in her bones, she was jealous and vicious. As the saying goes, one may know a person for a long time without understanding their heart. This sentence could not be more appropriate when used on Luo Wangfei. Even though the living king of hell was a bit scary, but they were women. If they weren't his sisters-in-law, then he wouldn't do anything to them. At this time, he naturally smiled as he spoke to Jingwan. How could Jingwan not understand the sarcasm, but she also knew what kind of mentality they had. If they didn't do anything, wouldn't it seem weak? Therefore, she smiled even more brightly. If they were unhappy with her, Jingwan could naturally refute them back. If it was like nothing, it could poke their lungs until they hurt. Her husband doted on her, and there was no one else by her husband's side. So what? She was jealous and vicious, but it was clear that she lived a better and more comfortable life than these virtuous people like them. So, not only did he fail to find fault, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. My sixth sister-in-law and my sixth uncle are in love with each other. It's a pity that it's not perfect yet. It would be great if they could have a legitimate eldest son. As the ninth princess consort spoke, she glanced at Jingwan's stomach. It's been more than half a year. Sixth sister-in-law, is there still no sign of pregnancy? Sixth uncle married late. By the time the uncles younger than him reached his age, I'm afraid they would already have a group of children. Madame Luo's reputation did not affect her. This was probably her only weakness. Speaking of this, the ninth princess consort was complacent. She had been married to the ninth prince for 2 months, but she found out that she was pregnant. Moreover, she gave birth to a boy at one go. She was quite strong-willed about this. It's fate to have a child. I heard that 2 more concubines in your mansion are pregnant. Congratulations, ninth sister-in-law, you are going to be a mother again. She had been taking contraceptive measures. It would be strange if she could get pregnant. Every time she took contraceptive pills, someone took the initiative to use them. Considering the current situation and her physical condition, Jingwan was happy to do so. The ninth princess consort's face turned pale. It was a happy thing to have a child in her belly. Anyone else would be unlucky and unhappy. There was another person who had no confidence in the matter of children, and that was Princess Rui. At present, there were still only 2 girls in Prince Rui's mansion, and they were Princess Rui's children. However, girls were not included in the list of children. Prince Rui was the most virtuous among them. However, there were many people who talked about him behind his back. He acted so well on the surface, but no one knew how vicious he was in the backyard of Prince Rui's mansion. Therefore, regardless of other things, a child was a woman's Achilles heel. While these women were talking, the men gathered in another corner. They could faintly hear their conversation, so the topic naturally turned to this. The Gong Prince glanced at Li Hongyuan. Thinking about how he was not polite at the birthday banquet, he really did not dare to provoke him again. So he pointed the spearhead at Prince Rui. "Third brother, it seems that there hasn't been any good news in your mansion for more than a year. Among us brothers, besides sixth brother, you are the only one who is married. You shouldn't be too busy and neglect third sister-in-law and the other people in your backyard. In any case, you have nothing to do recently, so you should hurry up and give birth to 2 little nephews. It doesn't matter whether they are legitimate children or concubines. When the time comes, imperial father and imperial concubine Nyang Nyang will be happy, don't you think so?" The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener did. Prince Rui's complexion was slightly unsightly. How to say it, although he wasn't a greedy person, the frequency of him going to the backyard was still the same as before. Moreover, the mansion had indeed been quiet for a long time. It was reasonable to say that it shouldn't be like this. Originally, he didn't care that much about having children. It wasn't like he couldn't have children. Once he succeeded, he could have as many children as he wanted. However, seeing his other brother's sons being born one after another, he still subconsciously became anxious. Now that there had been no news for such a long time, he didn't care at all. It was definitely fake. Li Hongyuan acted as if he didn't hear. Some people, sometimes, were simply blessed by the gods. After that, the princes and princesses who were still in the palace arrived one after another. The concubines also appeared one after another. Qin Shufei's spirit seemed to be quite good. After all, it had been more than a month since she was poisoned. However, imperial concubine Su's expression was somewhat listless. The foundation on her face was very thick. Jingwan always felt that imperial concubine Su seemed to have aged a lot. The crow's feet at the corners of her eyes couldn't be hidden anymore. Imperial concubine Wei was still okay. After the people of the former Wei left, the imperial household department did indeed embezzle some of her money. However, the former Wei quickly sent imperial concubine Wei's dowry. It was very generous. In fact, these were all fought for by the former Wei eldest prince. After all, the two of them had a deal. Imperial concubine Wei said that if she didn't live well, who knew what she would do? In any case, the former Wei eldest prince managed to smooth over the matter of imperial concubine Wei staying in the Qi Yuan. Then, he wantonly fought for imperial concubine Wei's dowry and fiercely played the good name of good brother. The former Wei eldest prince had a lot of dirt on the former Wei crown prince. In addition, the former Wei fifth prince began to jump up and down, secretly wanting to fight for the throne. He caused all kinds of trouble for the crown prince and also stirred up the water in the capital of the former Wei. The former Wei was not calm at all. Finally, there was the empress. No matter what, she looked a lot thinner. She had suffered a lot. Luchengdi arrived late and was not in a good mood. He was really above millions of people. He alone could affect everyone's mood. Thus, because of his arrival, the scene suddenly became extremely quiet. "What, I am a scourge. When I come, all of you are mute?" Chapter 448. This wasn't easy to answer, anything could be wrong. Of course, there were some people who were completely unaffected and didn't care at all, such as Li Hongyuan and Jingwan. They were in this situation. In fact, they really wanted to coax Luchengdi into becoming an emperor, but unfortunately, this husband and wife pair, one was unintentional and the other was unintentional. And the others couldn't coax him even if they wanted to. Luchengdi was so angry that he couldn't help but want to choke this group of unfilial sons to death. However, this group of unfilial sons didn't do anything, at most they just scolded a few words. He couldn't punish them for no reason just because he was in a bad mood. Then he would be no different from an incapable ruler. Not to mention other things, those ministers should have opinions about him. The New Year's Eve dinner that was supposed to be lively and happy, directly turned into an awkward silence at the beginning. Jingwan wasn't sure if this was the first time this family was like this. In any case, after coming to this world, it was the first time she encountered this. In the past, even in Qi and Fu, even if most of the Luo family was in the capital, she, grandmother and fourth uncle could still have a comfortable and happy New Year's Eve. So, the imperial family and whatnot, sometimes it was really annoying. Jingwan felt that it was better to spend it with her own husband in the Wangfu. Even if it was just 2 people, it was definitely 100 times, 1,000 times better than now. Jingwan sat next to Li Hongyuan. On the table, there were tea and snacks, dried fruits, and a variety of other things, so she could leisurely pass the time. As for the surrounding atmosphere, it was better to just ignore it. Of course, the awkward silence wouldn't last forever. As long as Lu Chengdi didn't flip out, there would always be someone to slowly warm up the atmosphere, and then find a way to brush up a good impression in front of Lu Chengdi. Of course, they had to be extra careful tonight, otherwise they might brush up a bad impression. Almost half of the banquet was over, and the atmosphere finally returned to normal, at least on the surface. Jin Qian Wangfei is becoming more and more beautiful. Today's dress complements each other even more, bright and moving and festive. Jingwan, who was happily eating, suddenly heard these words and felt baffled. Looking for the source of the voice, the Gong Prince's biological mother was clearly smiling, but those faint eyes clearly didn't have any good intentions. Thinking about it, the Gong Prince had been beaten miserably by Jin Qinwang over and over again. It could be said that they had long formed a death grudge, so it wasn't surprising that someone would come looking for trouble. Jingwan smiled nonchalantly, waiting for her opponent to make his move. Of course, the others weren't as calm, especially the Gong Prince. After all, the shadow that Jin Prince gave him was quite big, but since his own mother had already spoken, he couldn't say anything more. As for the others, they were more like watching a show. As long as it had nothing to do with them, they would be happy if others were to tear each other apart. It would be even better if both sides suffered losses, especially now that both sides were making people want to get rid of them as soon as possible. Of course, it was just a thought. It's just that Ben Gong was thinking, the soldiers at the northeast border are fighting a bloody battle, isn't it not very good to be dressed like this? The Gong Princess Mufei used a handkerchief to cover her mouth, as if to hide the smile on her lips. These words really didn't beat around the bush, but the lethality was indeed a bit big. Not only that, even Lu Chengdi looked over, and the others also responded accordingly. Jingwan's mental fortitude was strong, so she wasn't the least bit moved, and even smiled. I don't know how the war in the northeast is going, these things naturally have Imperial Father and the courtiers to worry about. I personally believe that with Qi Yuan's national strength, defeating Zhennu Mountain is only a matter of time, but listening to Nyang's words, it seems that the war isn't going well. So much so that even the Son of Heaven has to be careful. Also, Nyang lives in the Imperial harem. Where did you get this information? The Gong Princess Mufei's face instantly lost all color. She couldn't find fault, and in a few seconds, 2 big hats were put on her head. Qi Yuan's downfall, and the Imperial harem's interference in politics, either one of these could send her to the 18th level of hell. She wasn't the Empress, nor Imperial concubine Su, nor Imperial concubine Qin Shu. She wasn't the Emperor's favorite concubine, nor did she have a strong background. She didn't need to balance any power, so if Lu Chengdi wanted to punish her, he didn't even need to think about it. How could she not be afraid? The other one who was scared to the point of breaking out in cold sweat was the Gong Prince. Although his biological mother wasn't much help to him, if something happened to her, it would be a great loss to him. Your Majesty. The mother and son almost spoke at the same time, trying to remedy the situation. Enough. Lu Chengdi fiercely put down the cup, making a banged sound. He turned his head and coldly looked at the woman who had been by his side for many years, without the slightest bit of emotion. Put away your little thoughts, if there's a next time, I won't let you off lightly. The people who were about to speak instantly became mute, not daring to speak again. After all, being let off was already extremely lucky. Of course, after this incident, the atmosphere naturally became gloomy again. This kind of atmosphere was always oppressive. Some people complained that the Gong Princess Mufei was looking for trouble, not stopping even during the new year. She clearly knew that the emperor was in a bad mood, clearly knew that the emperor was biased, yet she still went up to provoke him. Not only did she lift a stone to smash her own foot, she also implicated others. This person's mentality was like this. However, some people glanced at the living king of hell. Should they be glad that this lord didn't flip out? Li Hongyuan was indeed very indifferent, as if what happened had nothing to do with him. However, when the Gong Prince inadvertently met his gaze, it was like he was being stared at by something extremely frightening. The hair on his body instantly stood on end, and a chill ran up from the soles of his feet. The Gong Prince regretted once again, why didn't he stop his mother? The Gong Prince was definitely scared of Li Hongyuan, but because this hatred was getting deeper and deeper, he took every opportunity to fight back. Not only did he fail every time, but he also stumbled. It looked like he was about to be suppressed to the end. At this time, Jingwan poured a cup of wine and raised it to Luchengdi. Fu Huang, this daughter-in-law toasts you. Then she said a few auspicious words. Fu Huang is worried about state affairs, but you should also take care of your dragon body. General He's fame, even this daughter-in-law has heard of it. Fu Huang should rest assured, perhaps tomorrow we'll be able to receive news of victory. As for other things, as the saying goes, mountains and rivers repeat, but there's no road, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. Today's predicament, maybe tomorrow we'll be able to break it. The body is the capital, only when the body is healthy can we deal with those things. Moreover, perhaps, he's looking at you. Luchengdi stared blankly, then as if he understood, he smiled, old Six's wife is right. It's the new year, it should be lively, how come it's so cold and cheerless today? The chamberlain waiting on the side was also clever, immediately arranging dance music, and the atmosphere quickly warmed up. Li Hongyuan poured a cup of wine for himself, then poured half a cup for Jingwan. Why are you paying attention to him? Jingwan smiled, I just don't like this kind of depressing feeling. Li Hongyuan's wine cup, which had already reached his mouth, paused. That's true, in the Luo family, the atmosphere should be good. Jingwan didn't deny this point. Li Hongyuan shook Jingwan's hand, endure for 1 or 2 more years. He drank a cup of wine, his tone exceptionally indifferent. In this kind of public place, only he, Li Hongyuan, would dare to say such disgraceful words. Jingwan heard the deeper meaning in his words, but didn't show it at all, admiring the beauty's dance. Li Hongyuan glanced at Jingwan, then indifferently admired the dance. Speaking of which, his wife had the ability to predict. After all, at the northeast border, today was going to be the battle that would determine the fate. According to the news, General He and the others had already determined who the traitor was, but they didn't find the traitor. Instead, they decided to beat them at their own game. Therefore, the time of the incident was still tonight. Although they wouldn't receive any good news tomorrow, if things went smoothly, it would probably be delayed for 2 or 3 days. As for the imperial noble consort's matter, it had already been arranged, and there would be a turning point tonight. At midnight, the bell on the tall tower continuously rang, and the entire sky above the capital was filled with the sound of firecrackers. The members of the imperial family had already moved out of the hall. Looking at the blazing fire and the constant crackling sounds, how many people were there? They hoped that it would really be able to reach the sky and prosper. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly. Although it wasn't strong, and it didn't last for long, basically everyone felt it. Many people's faces immediately changed, because it felt very much like an earthquake. At midnight, the new year had just begun, and they were already playing this game. No one would be in a good mood. Luchengdi suppressed his anger. Go investigate. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan looked at each other without leaving a trace. Chapter 449. Luchengdi's plan had come to fruition before the people living in the prince's mansion left the palace. However, the result was far beyond Luchengdi's expectation. It was not an earthquake, but the collapse of a mountain. It was the kind that caused a huge commotion. A huge mountain, seemed to have been split in half. After the collapse, what appeared in front of people was a stone tablet, which could also be called a heavenly book. The stone tablet was not a simple stone tablet. It was chiseled from a huge rock. Then, the general of the Shishan barracks personally brought it to Luchengdi. That's right, the place that collapsed could be said to be within the range of the Shishan barracks. It was less than 100 feet away from the barracks. Speaking of which, because it was New Year's Eve, although except for a few generals, the rest of the people could not go home. These people also had to celebrate the new year. Then, the sides suddenly collapsed with a deafening sound. Moreover, at that time, there were a few people who were walking forward. They were less than 5 feet away. If the collapse had happened a little later, or if their speed had been a little faster, they would have undoubtedly died. Such an unforeseen event almost caused them to have a heart attack one by one. After such a thing happened, the people in the Shishan barracks naturally went to check it out immediately. Of course, the surrounding soil was loose, so they had to be extra careful. After going down, they saw the stone tablet in a conspicuous position. They didn't dare to neglect this kind of heaven's will and reported it immediately. Then, the people sent by Luchengdi arrived and the stone tablet was brought to Luchengdi. When Luchengdi saw the stone tablet, he was so shocked that he couldn't speak. After a long time, "Mommy, Master Liaochen said you were not immortal. Now that I see it, it's true. But I didn't expect." There were not only words on the stone tablet, but also a fairy statue. Luchengdi's hand kept caressing the fairy statue. At this moment, most of the people were attracted by the stone tablet. They immediately understood the words on it. Their hearts were filled with excitement, and they couldn't hide it from their faces. However, no one cared about them at this moment. Li Hongyuan and Jingwan were probably the only ones who could remain unmoved. The things on the stone tablet were actually very simple. It was to fabricate a beautiful identity for the imperial noble consort to come to the mortal world to experience the tribulation. It also vaguely mentioned what would happen if she was treated well and what would happen if she was treated badly. Jingwan coldly looked at Luchengdi, who was completely immersed in his own world. Nothing around him could affect him. Jingwan felt disgusted every time she saw such a scene. As far as she knew, Luchengdi held the portrait of Huang Guifei all day long after his birthday. But not long after, he still entered the harem and held those low-ranking but extremely delicate concubines. However, what Jingwan was more curious about was how someone got this thing under the mountain. If it was in a deep forest or a natural cave, it would be easier to operate. Jingwan suppressed her doubts and turned around to ask. Of course, because it appeared in such a place, no one would suspect that it was man-made. Obviously, once the stone tablet appeared, more than half of the obstacles for the establishment of the altar were cleared. Not to mention other things, even if Luchengdi was hysterical, he would subconsciously feel guilty about treating Huang Guifei well. Therefore, no matter what, he would definitely facilitate this matter. The next day, at this time, the news had spread all over the streets and alleys of the capital city. It happened so fast that some people did not expect it. However, the matter about the imperial noble consort was widely known. Now, how could they stop it? So they could only watch the matter become more and more serious. The negative emotions of the people were weakened little by little and moved to the other side. The Shishan barracks was an important army that guarded the capital city. There were basically 50,000 soldiers stationed there. About 100,000 soldiers were under the command of the generals. That was 200,000 soldiers who were stationed in the Shishan barracks in rotation. As long as some of these people showed up and spread false information, this matter would become a myth. In fact, it was very clear that no one died and no animals were found dead or injured. People did not think that it was a coincidence. If it was a god and not a ghost, and a god with a kind heart, many people would be willing to worship it. When the court officials and madams entered the palace to pay their New Year's greetings, they were all discussing this matter. Jingwan listened quietly. The effect was really good. As for the stone tablet under the mountain, it turned out that it was because of the underground river. She realized that her husband really had a lot of talented people under him. All of them were very powerful. However, this matter did not stop. Instead, it reached its peak 3 days later. This was because the northeast border city reported a victory. On New Year's Eve, the tribes of Mount Jinnu launched a sneak attack on the northeast border city. In the end, General He was already prepared and fought back. He killed tens of thousands of enemies and defeated the tribes of Mount Jinnu. For the next few decades, a war of this scale would not happen in the northeast. Calculating the time, didn't it coincide with the collapse of the Shishan barracks? Her Majesty Fairy protected Qi Yuan. Although to a certain extent, she stole the limelight of the Northeast Army, she also helped the Northeast Army block some dangers. With her goal achieved, Jingwan sat in Li Hongyuan's arms and looked at the details of the battle in the Northeast border city. Chapter 450. Although Jingwan didn't know all of Li Hongyuan's arrangements, she knew most of it. General He and the others had already determined who the traitor was and planned to beat them at their own game. A big battle was unavoidable, but it should have been a sure win and the Northeast Army's losses would be minimized. However, they didn't expect an unforeseen event to occur. Because there was more than one traitor general and the two traitors were not related, they found one and didn't find anything wrong with it. Thus, they relaxed their vigilance against the others and unsurprisingly, something happened. Fortunately, He Zhihai, this brainy, killing machine, didn't become dizzy from the killing and didn't notice anything. After sensing that something was wrong, his old man and the others didn't have the time to act. He immediately led a dozen or so bodyguards and rushed back to kill the traitor general's bodyguards. No one was a match for him and in the end, he unceremoniously killed the traitor general. However, in the end, they were still a step too late. One of the city gates was broken through. Because of this, they lost nearly 10,000 soldiers of the Northeast Army. And these people accounted for more than half of the total losses of the Northeast Army in this battle. In the end, they won, and it was a beautiful victory. However, none of the generals were happy, especially General He. His face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. More than 70% of those soldiers were veterans. Veterans represented combat strength, experience, and a greater chance of survival in war. However, so many people didn't die in the battle against the enemy, but died for the selfishness of their own people. How painful was this? However, not only could this matter not be made public, they had to do their best to cover it up, from the common people to Emperor Lu Cheng. After all, if people knew about this, the people would lose trust in the Northeast Army. This wasn't a big deal, but they were afraid that some people would use this matter to make an issue out of it and attack the entire Northeast Army for personal gain. Therefore, while the people of the Northeast border city were celebrating, Emperor Lu Cheng was overjoyed, and the civil and military officials were full of smiles. The general's mansion in the Northeast border city was overcast with dark clouds. They were worried about those soldiers who had died in vain and how to hide this matter. The news of victory had been sent back, but how were they going to write the following memorials? A hot-tempered general slammed the table. Those two sons of bitches, after doing such a thing, you still want to give them credit? Chopping that bastard sea of consciousness in one slash is really letting him off too lightly. If it were me, I would skin him alive, pull out his tendons, and eat him alive. His eyes looked like they were about to split open, and his eyes were filled with rage. In order to cover it up, the two of them naturally could not be exposed. The best way was naturally to sacrifice their lives for the country. However, they were clearly traitors who had betrayed the country. It was fine if they were not condemned by the public, but they were praised by the world. However, what about those soldiers who had died in vain? Because of their low status, they could not even leave behind a name. No matter how one thought about it, it was hard to reconcile. Isn't there still one locked up in the dungeon? If Uncle feels unhappy, you can go and skin him alive. He Jihai said indifferently as he sat on the side. This time, He Jihai had truly started a massacre. When the battle ended, he was completely covered in blood. There was his own blood, but more of it was the blood of the enemy. It was clearly the middle of winter, but at this moment, his upper body was bare, and he was wrapped in a bloody white cloth. The battle had ended for almost 3 days, but his entire body still carried a thick smell of blood and killing intent. He was completely different from the little overlord of the past, and it was impossible to tell that he was actually just a 16 or 17-year-old youth. Before this battle, if He Jihai still had the temperament of a youth, after this battle, he had completely matured. And if General he were to ask for credit for this son, he would not hesitate at all, because this son could already bear the responsibility. Cutting that kind of person, I won't dirty my hands. He Jihai did not care. In fact, everyone knew that it was not that he was afraid of dirtying his hands, but that he could not do it. That was his life and death brother He Jihai stood up, Great General, other than the matter of the traitor, the rest, just write it down as it is. As for the rest, there will be someone to deal with it. This general will withdraw. He cupped his fist to his old man and simply left. The people in the room were startled. After a moment, someone faintly sighed, Jihai has really grown up. There was gratification, but also a kind of heartache and helplessness. If they could, who would want a 16 or 17-year-old boy to grow up in such a cruel way? Thinking about those young masters of the same age in the capital, how unrestrained and carefree, how carefree and carefree. He Jinwei's feelings were undoubtedly the most profound, but he did not say a word. He also understood his son's meaning. After all, there were many things that Jin Qinhuang already knew. During this period of time, you have all worked hard. Go back and rest. This general will ask for credit for you. If possible, you will be transferred back to the capital, or to other counties. In the end, this place was a bitter and cold place. There was a lack of clothing and food, and the environment was vile. These people more or less had hidden injuries on their bodies. Now, some of them were in unbearable pain. When they were old, they did not know how it would be. Therefore, if there was a chance, General he still hoped that they could live a comfortable life. They all understood the great general's love and care. At this time, even an iron-blooded man could not help but feel sour in his heart. In fact, after the He family survived this disaster, the Northeast Army in the Northeast border city survived this disaster, Li Hongyuan's heart relaxed a bit. As for the following matters, he would naturally take care of it. He secretly sent a message to the people he had planted in the Northeast to bring back the person who was still alive. He still had use for him. If the Northeast Army's general could not do it, he naturally could do whatever he wanted. After the victory in the Northeast border city, the originally tense people naturally relaxed. The Imperial Gue phase matter also had a big turnaround. Luqing Emperor was really happy. The court that was originally scheduled to resume on the 3rd day was postponed without any accident. Like the previous years, after the 15th. The Son of Heaven was happy, so naturally, everyone was happy. It wasn't until the 7th day that Li Hongyuan accompanied Jingwan back to her maternal home. With such a heavy status, the Luo family's eldest aunt who married out, whether it was the previous generation or the same generation, naturally had to drag their family back, no matter what their impression of Jin Qinhuang was. In fact, although Li Hongyuan's reputation was not good, after Jingwan married him, the Luo family and the Luo family's close relatives basically did not suffer any trouble because of him. On the contrary, there were more benefits. This was something that was obvious to all. As such, it was believed that no one would not give face to him. This time, Jingwan returned to her maternal home and finally saw her granduncle Luo Peisong. It was not much different from when she was in Jiangnan. Luo Peisong expressed that he liked the things that Jingwan gave him very much. He received those expensive things and was not the least bit lenient. That's right, even if it was something that Jingwan gave, it had nothing to do with Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan naturally did not care about this kind of small matter. After a simple conversation, the men and women naturally separated and each did their own thing. Chapter 451. Jingwan held Luo Jingbua and Sun Yijia's daughter in her arms. Sister Xian will be 15 years old. Are you going to hold a grand celebration? Sun Yijia slowly peeled almonds, occasionally eating one, but mostly putting it on the small plate beside her. We didn't have such plans at first, but things took a turn for the worse after the new year. Grandfather and grandmother said that if we didn't have a happy new year, we should find other ways to make up for it. The closest one is the Lantern Festival. It's a good day for Sister Xian to be born on that day, but it's already the Lantern Festival, so it's inevitable that Sister Xian will be left out. So we're going to hold a celebration for her when she turns 14, and it'll be the same in the future. Sun Yijia looked up and smiled. I was thinking that since she's still young, it'll be too extravagant. I was worried that she won't be able to suppress her good fortune. Grandfather said that although the Luo family isn't an aristocratic family, it's still a scholarly family with 200 to 300 years of history. A girl from the Luo family shouldn't be unable to suppress this. She still has her own aunt to back her up, so what's there to be afraid of? Sun Yijia laughed mockingly at the end of her sentence. Grandfather really said that? Jingwan was also speechless. Did the strict and somewhat rigid Minister Shangshu in her impression really exist? It seemed that after coming into contact with him in the capital, he was a completely different person. Sister Wan, why don't you go and verify it yourself? Fine, all of them were amazing. Another person who completely changed her persona. She used to be the flower of high mountains, the most honorable girl in Duke Ding's residence. She was arrogant, indifferent, and the moon that everyone adored. Now, she was warm and gentle, and could even be spicy when necessary. She was very combative, and no longer the one who revolved around others. Instead, she was the one who revolved around her daughter and husband. She was willing to endure hardships and become ordinary. Although she was easy to destroy, she still gave people the feeling that she was blooming beautifully and charmingly. Although she was still a little cold to outsiders. Jingwan held Sister Xian's chubby little hand and smiled gently. This was good, wasn't it? Jingwan really couldn't imagine what would have happened if this sister-in-law and best friend of hers had married her cousin, Prince Kong. She might really wither and rot from the inside. In the end, she would definitely have an unlucky life. As for the possibility of marrying the King of Hell, Jingwan immediately threw this possibility out of her mind. This assumption was really mentally ill. She was asking for trouble. If Sister Jia really became the Jin princess consort, it had nothing to do with her. After all, she wasn't familiar with a certain someone at that time, so she naturally didn't have any thoughts about it. Even if it's not Sister Xian's birthday, Auntie will definitely prepare a big gift for her. Don't you think so, baby? Jingwan gently shook Sister Xian's small body to make her laugh. Sister Xian really loved to smile. She had a wide grin on her face and her big eyes were sparkling. She was so adorable that Jingwan couldn't help but give her a few kisses on her little face. Since you like it so much, you should give birth to one yourself. There's no rush. When the time comes, it will naturally be born. Moreover, other people's little treasures are little cuties. If it's your own, it's a little devil. It's early. Hugging her occasionally and watching over her all the time were two completely different things. Jingwan felt that she was still too young and did not want to suffer so early. Sun Yijia also guessed some things, but it's just that there are some people that you might not be able to explain. It's okay, I can handle it. If I can't handle it, I'll close the door and release the king of hell. Jingwan laughed. After marrying someone, you're becoming more and more improper and less dignified. Originally, she had a lot of opinions about Jin Qin Wang, but seeing how he treated Jingwan, she changed her opinion a lot. However, it was absolutely impossible for her to change her bad impression of Li Hongyuan into a good one. Such a good sister Wan, no man could be absolutely compatible with her. Sun Yijia had never thought about what would happen if she married Jin Qin Wang. She didn't even have the slightest assumption. If she was asked about the changes in Jin Qin Wang after he got married, whether he regretted it or not, Sun Yijia might just roll her eyes. There were many things that Sun Yijia could see very clearly. Even if Jin Qin Wang was good to Sister Wan, he might not be good to other people. If it was anyone else, it was the same logic. Some people saw that other women were doted on by their husbands in every possible way, they would be envious and jealous. They would want to get involved and get that doting. But they didn't think about it. If that man changed, he would change twice. Would you still get the same doting that made people envious? Besides, from the beginning, Sun Yijia only had one person in her heart. She was very satisfied with her current life. As for the fight for the throne, it might involve the Luo family and destroy this peace. She didn't know when it started, but Sun Yijia was no longer worried about this. Jingwan asked about the situation of the other people in the Luo family. Of course, it was mainly the people of the second branch. After all, the last time she went back to the Luo family, everyone was together. There were many people, so she didn't ask about the specifics. Your third brother is still the same. Studying, painting, going out to meet friends. Sometimes, he would take me and Xian Jia out for a walk. You know his kind of person. He doesn't like to haggle over anything. He is also loyal and has many friends. As for mother, she is quite carefree. When you went to Jiangnan, she got to know two madams who are compatible with her. She goes out more often than before. Father doesn't go to the concubine's room anymore. Mother is more relaxed and looks younger. As for father, Sun Yijia's expression was a little subtle, he has changed a lot. You know what he was like in the past. Now, he spends all his time on official business and deals with those in the officialdom. Jingwan was silent for a moment. Her father was indeed a man of his words. For her, he walked on the path that he didn't like at all. In the past, Jingwan didn't have any objections. She didn't have the idea of hoping that her father would become a great man and raise her status. However, now that he had done this, it would be a lie to say that she wasn't moved at all. After a moment, Jingwan smiled, grandfather is working hard now. In the future, our sister Xian can be all kinds of awe-inspiring outside, right? Jingwan deliberately misunderstood. Sun Yijia also smiled and didn't say anything. Some things were better understood by everyone. Sister-in-law, let's go to mother's place and sit together. Okay. If I keep hogging you, mother will definitely be jealous. She might even have a problem with me. Jingwan was helpless about this. There was no other way. She wasn't close to her mother and they didn't have a common language. They couldn't stay together for long. It was easy to have an awkward silence. Therefore, it would be much better to find a good time and find someone to ease the tension. Sun Yijia covered her mouth and laughed. Even so, it was better than the relationship between her and her mother that existed for benefits. Madame Zhang was looking forward to the stars and the moon at Luo Mei house. When she saw her daughter and daughter-in-law coming hand in hand, she immediately beamed with joy. The meeting this time was much better than expected. Then, when it was time to leave Luo Mei house for lunch, Jingwan said when she saw the courtyard full of plum blossoms, "Mother, let father cut a bouquet of plum blossoms for me and send it to the prince's mansion later." "Okay, your father will cut it for you personally," Madame Zhang said with a smile. Right now, Madame Zhang was really satisfied with everything. Jingwan saw that Jin Qinhuang's complexion was a little dark. It was obvious that he was in a bad mood. The surrounding men were carefully and fearfully accompanying him, fearing that the king of hell would flip out if something went wrong. Jingwan acted as if she didn't see it and smiled as she greeted Wang Yi. Li Hongyuan looked at her coldly. Just from his eyes, it seemed that the coldness could be felt. People couldn't help but sweat for Jingwan, fearing that Jin Qinhuang would vent his anger on her. Jingwan wasn't afraid at all. However, it wasn't good to pacify him now. With so many people, it wouldn't be good if they were too intimate. Fortunately, the king of hell's lunacy generally wouldn't act up in front of outsiders. After lunch, Jingwan stayed by old Madame Luo's side. The grandmother and grandson talked about intimate things. Not long after, Lucheng Emperor summoned Jin Qinhuang. Jingwan also left with him. In any case, she would come back on the 14th, so there was no need to rush to say everything today. In the first month, there wasn't much to do. Jingwan was naturally more idle. Out of boredom, she stroked the tiger cub. After raising it for more than a month, it was basically mature. The tiger cub had also grown bigger. However, if she continued to raise it like this, Jingwan was 100% sure that when the tiger grew up, it would only become a domestic pet. It was impossible for it to return to the mountains and forests. Li Hongyuan lifted the curtain and entered the room. He saw Jingwan leisurely holding a ball of white stuff. There was another ball lying on her lap, leisurely reading a book. His eyes instantly darkened. He stepped forward, picked up the cub's nape and threw it out. The other cub saw this and quickly jumped down and ran away. Jingwan put down the book and looked up at him. She wanted to say that he should be gentle with the tiger cub, but in a flash, she wisely chose to shut up. She got up and straightened her collar. "Why are you back so soon?" "What, you don't want to see Ben Wang?" Jingwan wanted to cry injustice. "What are you talking about? I just felt that it was a bit strange." "Ah." The king of hell sneered and grabbed Jingwan's wrist. "Someone come, carry the water, Ben Wang wants to take a bath." With a bit of force, he brought Jingwan into the clean room. Chapter 452. Was it really a bath? He was clearly having an attack. His illness had clearly improved, but who touched his sensitive nerves today? Jingwan felt like she wanted to hit someone. She didn't do anything, but she subconsciously rubbed her small waist. She wanted to cry but had no tears to shed. In order to let someone be a little protective of the fairer sex, Jingwan felt that it was better for her to be more obedient and take the initiative. It was just that when the living king of hell was crazy, he was completely unreasonable. You could pick the bones out of an egg. To put it bluntly, whatever you did was wrong. As the saying went, if you did the right thing, he would have no reason to cause trouble. Jingwan wanted to take off her clothes, and he tore them savagely. She wanted to step into the bathtub, and he picked her up and threw her in. She obediently leaned against him, and he gave her a thorough wash, as if there was something dirty on her body. Jingwan couldn't bear it anymore and flipped out. If it weren't for the fact that he was her man and that he was having an attack, she would have slapped him to the sky and let him stand side by side with the sun. What a pity, this kind of thing could only be thought of. Even so, the living king of hell was still unmoved. This kind of person who was unmoved by force or persuasion was the most difficult to deal with. Jingwan couldn't really get angry with him, so in the end, she could only helplessly approach him. While stroking his strong waist, she asked, "What's wrong with you today? Can you tell me directly? Can you tell me directly? You're making me uncomfortable." Li Hongyuan's expression eased a little, but he couldn't say that he was bored in the Luo family and had no one to accompany him. Could he say that he even saw Chen Jingmin? The Chen family was Madame Luo's maiden family, so it was normal for her to come to the Luo family. Besides, Jingwan hadn't even seen Chen Jingmin's face, so she might not have thought of this person. Moreover, it was not a man to torture his wife because of this kind of thing. However, when he thought of his wife stopping him from killing people, he couldn't feel happy. "Wan, don't hug those animals in the future. It's best if you don't touch them at all. If I find out about it again, I'll have them cut up and use them as fertilizer for your flowers. Wan, you like flowers and plants more than those animals, don't you think?" That's right, this was one of the reasons why Li Hongyuan fell ill. So, was this the reason why he changed his usual style and didn't do it right away, but took a shower first, and a shower at that? Crazy. Jingwan didn't intend to pursue the fact that this person had been in the wrong since the Luo family. However, one could only look at the cute furry things, but not stroke their fur. What was the point of raising them? Li Hongyuan didn't give her time to think about those things. He controlled his emotions and didn't eat his wife fiercely. On the contrary, he was quite gentle. If he was too gentle, it became extraordinarily torturous. And the time was unprecedentedly long. Jingwan was completely eaten from head to toe, from the inside out. The continuous feeling made her collapse, and her tears couldn't stop at all. Someone kissed her away and chuckled at the same time, with temptation and wickedness, which made people's souls seem to tremble. In the end, Jingwan didn't move for a long time. She suspected that she had become a disabled person. When someone's mood eased, Jingwan thought that he finally knew how to control himself, which was worthy of celebration. But the fact was that someone had been upgraded to a super serious patient, which was even more abnormal, wasn't it? Li Hongyuan's negative emotions had already subsided. Although it wasn't intense, the taste was equally wonderful. Kissing Jingwan's cheek, it seemed that he still wanted to continue. However, if he continued to bully her, he was afraid that he would be swept out of the door. In the next few days, Li Hongyuan dealt with the follow-up issues in the northeast border town while staying with Jingwan in the Wangfu, living a dejected life that didn't know what day it was. Jingwan once again felt that she was really going to become a disabled person. As for whether the entire capital was truly peaceful or surging with undercurrents, it seemed to have nothing to do with them. However, no matter what happened, after the 15th day of the Lantern Festival, when the court reopened, what should be revealed would definitely be revealed. Jingwan said that she wanted to prepare a big gift for Xian Jia, the weight would definitely be 10%. A family with a real family background would start to accumulate dowry from the moment their family's daughter was born. Although Sun Yijia's own family background was very rich, after all, Jin Wangfu was only a hair from 9 oxen. Jingwan didn't mind helping to accumulate it at all. In any case, no matter how rich it was, in the future, her uncle would support her. When she reached her husband's family, they could forget about scheming against her. However, in order to not let her own little niece be too ostentatious, the things that Jingwan chose, other than being several times thicker on the surface, there was no other way, the gifts that Jin Wangfu gave before were placed there. If it suddenly became too thin, then it would be abnormal. The truly good things were all kept in private, not ostentatious and not conspicuous. Don't look at how a lot of things were sent to the Luo family before the new year, but if one were to carefully calculate, there wasn't anything that was truly eye-catching. Jingwan still had the most basic sense of propriety. Even so, she was still warned by her own grandparents. However, thinking about it carefully, the amount of money in her hands now compared to the situation in the Luo family before, that seemed to be a bit too extravagant. However, the wealth of Jin Wangfu was placed there. Although outsiders didn't know how much it was, Li Hongyuan was recognized as the wealthiest person in the entire capital other than the emperor. This gift was too little and didn't match his status. It definitely wouldn't do. Even before Jingwan married in, Li Hongyuan didn't care about the gift at all. It was only Mu Gonggong, who was the steward of the Wangfu, who intentionally prepared a gift for the other Wangfu. Now that there was a Wangfei in charge, it was impossible for it to be like this. Moreover, the precedent of sending gifts to the Luo family was set. Other families definitely couldn't continue to be so stingy. Otherwise, Jingwan would be blatantly subsidizing her maternal family. Most women who always thought of their maternal family would at most be criticized by others, and outsiders couldn't do anything about it. But for a Wangfei who only thought of her maternal family, the problem was big. The congratulatory gift from Jin Wangfu was sent to the Luo family on the 13th day of the first month. Originally, when they saw the things on the gift list, Sun Yijia and Luo Jinghua were very helpless. They knew that this younger sister was now rich and should at least take it easy. However, when they were organizing the things, they saw the things that weren't on the gift list and were completely speechless. It was just 4 small boxes. Among all the things that were present, it wasn't eye-catching, but its value was more than 100 times more than the other things. The husband and wife looked at each other. Luo Jinghua sighed, "You know, Xiaomei, there's absolutely no possibility of returning it. Let Xian Jia keep it. According to the current situation, when Xian Jia grows up, this dowry, we probably only need to prepare some furniture." When she came back a few days ago, Zumo already told her. Now, it's good. On the surface, she didn't restrain herself much, but in private, she's doing more and more. It's better to do what's on the surface. At the very least, she still has a sense of propriety. Sun Yijia's mood wasn't much different from Luo Jinghua's. In the end, she could only slowly put away the things. If it were some other people, they would be very happy. They couldn't wait to have more, and more. It would be good if they could take all the wealth of Jin Wangfu for themselves. However, for this kind of person, no matter how rich Jingwan was, she would still be stingy. This time, for his great-granddaughter's first birthday, Luo Peishan could be said to be a big banquet. He didn't feel that it was inappropriate at all. To be honest, even if it was his own birthday, Luo Shangshu had never been like this. Instead, he tried to be as low-key as possible. Now, for a younger generation, who knows how many people couldn't help but ridicule in their hearts. How much did he like this child to be like this? Even Zheng Zhongsun was far behind. So, Shangshu Darren liked female dolls more? Although Jingwan knew that it was going to be held, but this level of grandeur was still somewhat unexpected. Wasn't it a bit too much? Li Hongyuan didn't care, it's just a younger generation's birthday, why bother so much? Jingwan thought about it and felt relieved. For grandfather to do this, his heart should be clear. It's just that, eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law will have a knot in their heart. Their eldest son turned 1 last year, and it seems that they only invited relatives and friends. It's much worse than this time. So what? Now your grandparents are in charge of the Luo family. Even if they are unhappy, they can only hold it in. They can't show the slightest dissatisfaction on their faces. Even if your grandparents die in the future, and your eldest uncle becomes the head of the the second branch of the Luo family will be separated, and it will be even less of a hindrance. On the contrary, they will be more attentive. After all, you are from the second branch. For your sake, even if your father and brothers are useless, as long as they don't do evil, they will definitely be rich and idle for the rest of their lives. In fact, they are not so incompetent, so it's destined that at least in the next few decades, your branch will be the most prosperous in the whole Luo family. As long as there is nothing wrong with your brain, you should know what to do. Your uncle and eldest cousin brother are not stupid people. So, Wan, you think too much. Li Hongyuan reached out and gently rubbed Jingwan's cheek with the back of his fingers. Wan, if you have the time to think about other people's feelings, why don't you think about me more? Jingwan really had to hand it to him for being able to bring up any topic. It just so happened that the Luo family had arrived, so Jingwan naturally broke away from this atmosphere that was becoming more and more strange. In order to participate in Sister Xian's week of catching, Jingwan came relatively early. At this time, those who had arrived were basically the Luo family's relatives and friends. Jingwan and Li Hongyuan had arrived, so the catching could begin. Speaking of which, they were waiting for Jingwan and the others. Once they arrived, they could naturally begin. The things to be used for the catching had long been prepared. Books, brushes, rulers, abacus, scissors, copper coins, rouge boxes, chopsticks, spoons, small toys, herbs, rags and so on. On the cushions on the square table, there were dozens of different kinds of things. Looking at the bright red Sister Xian, Jingwan reached out and pinched her small hand. Sister Xian was also someone who was not shy with strangers. When she saw Jingwan, she fluttered and wanted to call out. Jingwan carried her over and the little girl danced and giggled. Then her gaze fell on Jin Qinhuang who was at the side. Her black and bright eyes seemed to cast a trace of curiosity. Li Hongyuan reached out and touched her white and chubby little hand. Then Sister Xian seized the opportunity to grab his finger and subconsciously wanted to stuff it into her mouth. Li Hongyuan used a little bit of skill to make the little girl's action fall short. Jingwan's eyes flashed and a little mischievously stuffed Sister Xian into Li Hongyuan's arms. Li Hongyuan looked at Jingwan and slightly raised his eyebrows. Li Hongyuan's reputation was really too deeply rooted in people's hearts. So much so that the bystanders who looked at him became nervous, as if they were worried that he would get angry at a baby. Sun Yijia also could not help but worry and wanted to carry the child back. Who knew that Li Hongyuan actually reached out and caught the child? Moreover, his posture was very correct, not at all like he had never carried a child before. It made people unable to help but feel strange. Jin Qinhuang did not look like someone who had done this kind of thing before. Who exactly had the honor to be carried by the living king of hell, and definitely not just once? Sun Yijia and the others could still remember that not long after Sister Xian was born, Li Hongyuan carried Sister Xian for the first time and paralyzed her on his lap. No matter how they looked at it, it was very dangerous. In this nearly 1 year, what exactly happened? Who did the living king of hell carry? Naturally, it was his son from his previous life. When that child was young, he carried quite a few times. Jingwan's heart was similarly astonished. She looked at Li Hongyuan with a little curiosity. Li Hongyuan saw this in his eyes and did not say anything. He casually placed Sister Xian on the table. Let's start. Since this lord had spoken, naturally there was no need to delay anymore. Whether it was Sun Yijia or Luo Jinghua, they did not have high expectations for Sister Xian. They only hoped that she would live a safe and prosperous life. Therefore, they did not train her in advance. Chapter 453. Add this. Li Hongyuan casually threw his personal seal over. Everyone's faces once again changed into a strange color. That, Jin Wangye, did you forget that Xianjia is a girl, do you understand? A little girl catching Zhou Yong's seal, what's the meaning of that? Even if she caught it, what could she do? She, a girl, can be successful in her official career? Moreover, it's a Wang Ye's personal seal. What, in the future, there will be a female Wang Ye with a different surname? I know that your temperament is treacherous and unreliable, but in this kind of situation, can you restrain yourself a little? In any case, this is your in-laws' family, If you want to cause trouble in other places, then forget it. Jingwan was also slightly speechless for a moment, but it was fleeting. Her eyes flashed, why can't a girl step into the officialdom? Other things aside, if Xianjie really had this kind of idea in the future, with this kind of ability, the person with the highest authority would be this person beside her. If his feelings towards her were still the same, she believed that based on his ability to accept, he would not stop Xianjie from walking on that path. At present, a female official was not a fantasy story. After all, a hidden gene country was there. If they were female officials, as long as they had the ability, they would be able to have the same high position as men. Something like a Wang Ye, she didn't think about it. Thinking of this, Jingwan's eyes even carried a trace of expectation. Li Hongyuan turned his head to look at Jingwan. As the person who shared the same pillow, no one knew better than him what she was thinking. He slightly smiled. A female official, nothing more, there was nothing he couldn't give. Looking at the others, they were non-committal. This was the so-called promotion, if one really had the ability, so what if she was a Wang Ye? As Sister Xian Er's parents, meeting this kind of brother-in-law was also very helpless. However, they really did not care about this matter. Who said that a girl could not use a seal to scratch the skin? From a certain point of view, they even wanted to say, well done. If they wanted to do this, they might even be criticized by others. However, if it was Jin Qin Wang, even if he had an opinion, he would also hold it in. Thinking about it like this, it was really satisfying. Looking at the other people in the Luo family, perhaps compared to others, they had relatively more opportunities to come into contact with Jin Wang Ye. Especially Luo Shangshu and old Madame Luo, they were very clear about Li Hongyuan's nature and their psychological endurance was also very good. A seal was really nothing. Although there was a certain meaning to it, in reality, it really didn't mean anything. And Jingwan's younger brothers and sisters of the same generation, in fact, were somewhat restless in their hearts. They also wanted to take something and throw it up. However, in the end, they didn't have the guts. If they dared to do so, no matter what the reason was, they would certainly be dealt with very miserably. Sun Yijia whispered a few words to Sister Xian. This little baby might not understand what she was saying, but she should be able to get the gist of it. Even if she didn't understand, there were so many things around her. It was normal for her to play with them out of curiosity. So what if she was playing with them? Xian Jie had indeed been attracted by those things. Sun Yijia retreated and stood together with the Luo family, quietly watching and not giving any guidance. Xian Jie touched the things here and there. Most of the things she had seen before, but they weren't rare. After playing with them for a while, she threw them to the side. This caused the people around her to have no choice but to swallow back their words whenever they wanted to say something auspicious. After doing this several times, each and every one of them calmed down and wouldn't easily open their mouth until the end. Xian Jie grabbed the small abacus and shook it loudly. She grabbed it in her small hands and didn't let go. However, it seemed that this wasn't the end. She continued to shake it and picked up a small string of copper coins. And she accepted it. In the end, she grabbed Li Hongyuan's private seal. Looking left and right, she probably didn't see anything special about it and accepted it with a smile. With the toy in her hands, Xian Jie faced her mother and babbled, asking for a hug. However, some people were still immersed in the fact that she grabbed the seal. She really grabbed the seal. How did she grab the seal? It wasn't to the extent that they were greatly shocked, but they were a little unable to accept it. If it were just the first two things, needless to say, it would be that she was good at managing money. She would definitely choose a good one and praise it as much as she could for free. If it were a boy who grabbed the seal, he would inherit the fortune of the heavens and be successful in his career. Congratulations, congratulations. You have a successor. However, this was a girl. Girls, understand? They could only live in the backyard and take care of their husbands and children. If they appeared in public, they would be criticized. Therefore, they really didn't know what to say at that moment. However, Li Hongyuan's lips curled up slightly. She's a smart child. Of course. Don't you know whose niece she is? Jingwan quite shamelessly agreed. Indeed. Li Hongyuan also very unprincipled in his approval. In any case, everyone had become mute for the time being, so they didn't mind changing for a while. Wang Fei Nyang, you have the support of the living king of hell. Whatever you say, it's fine as long as you're happy. The living king of hell pampers his wife without any principles. In any case, other people don't even have the good fortune to have a good expression. As the saying goes, comparing oneself to others will only make one angry. Who let the Luo family's daughter enter the eyes of the living king of hell? If it wasn't for the wrong occasion, Sun Yijia really wanted to roll her eyes at this couple. Because of her background, Sun Yijia definitely saw Li Hongyuan more than others. She also understood him more than others. To be honest, when she saw how he interacted with Jingwan, she once suspected that this was a fake Jin Qinwang. The difference was really too big. However, no favorable impression was just no favorable impression. No matter how much she did or said, it was still the same. With one person speaking, the others naturally wouldn't remain silent. They selectively ignored that seal and only talked about the other two things. One after another, it was very lively and the atmosphere was very good. After the celebration, time was relatively free. At this time, it was natural to chew teeth and eat some snacks to pass the time. Those who had a good relationship could also go to each branch's courtyard to admire the scenery. Not to mention other things, in any case, Falling Plum House was a good choice. Speaking of which, the celebration shouldn't have been held so early. It should have been held before the formal banquet when the guests would gather. However, the people who would come to the Luo family today were not few in status. Whether it was Luo Rongyan or Luo Jinghua, to some extent, they weren't very presentable. If they were really allowed to participate, it would really be a loss of fortune for the little girl. There was no other way. The court hadn't started yet and there weren't many people who dared to hold a banquet at this time. Therefore, there were many idle people, so naturally, there were many people who came. Because there were many people, the masters of the Luo family must go and greet the guests. Even the relatively close in-laws and great-aunts who were married out were helping out. Jingwan's current status was too high. Those who could make her personally come out were only those of the same level. Unfortunately, those people were not invited by the Luo family. This was also reasonable. Therefore, Jingwan pulled Li Hongyuan to the courtyard where she lived before she married. The layout of the courtyard was still the same as before. It was just that there was no master living in it now. Every day, the servants would leave after cleaning. Therefore, it wasn't very lively. In the winter, it was even colder. However, the earth heater was burned early today, so it wasn't cold when they entered the room. Several of Jingwan's maids were not married yet, so they were still serving by her side. When they came back again, they were naturally very familiar with it. Soon, they dealt with things and then retreated to the outer room. This kind of thing had long been accustomed to in the prince's mansion. Before the two of them got married, Li Hongyuan had frequented this courtyard many times and was rather familiar with everything here. Therefore, the two of them interacting here did not seem to be much different from when they were in the prince's mansion. They were just as relaxed. About 2 hours later. Your Highness, Prince Kong is here with the little heir. Outside the door, Nanny Gong's voice was neither light nor heavy. They came uninvited? Jingwan looked at Li Hongyuan and said. Pay no attention to him. Li Hongyuan had no intention of getting up at all. Since Li Hongyuan didn't move, Jingwan naturally didn't move. Although he was a prince, he was much more restrained than before because of the Empress. Moreover, her grandfather was the minister of the Ministry of Personnel and his position was stable. As long as there was nothing wrong with his brain, he wouldn't be in a hurry to offend him. Moreover, now that Prince Rui had left the Ministry of Personnel, other ambitious princes should seize the opportunity. Even if the minister of the Ministry of Personnel was as difficult to deal with as the Prime Minister of the Cabinet, at least they couldn't be hostile to him. Therefore, there was no need to worry about any problems ahead. Prince Kong came in the name of Sun Yijia's legitimate cousin. In addition, his son missed his aunt. His reason was all right and aboveboard. Since he had shamelessly come without an invitation, even if someone cared about it, they would just grumble in their hearts. Luo Darren wore an increasingly amiable smile as he stroked his beard and played Tai Chi with Prince Kong. If Prince Kong were to compete with him, he would definitely be played to death. Wang Ye, Prince Jin has arrived. Should this official invite him out so that the two Wang Ye can have a good chat? That is not necessary. Find that living king of hell to have a chat. He didn't want to have a stomachache. Therefore, Prince Kong also didn't want to see the living king of hell. Thus, it would be best if the two didn't interfere. However, even if they didn't meet now, when the banquet started, they would still meet. It couldn't be helped. The two had the same status, so their seats were naturally arranged together. Therefore, Prince Kong was destined to have a stomachache. Prince Kong didn't have a Wang Fei, so Jingwan was the boss of the female guests. At this time, they met people from Dingguo Gongfu. To be exact, they were several sisters-in-law from Sun Yijia's maternal family. Jingwan wasn't unfamiliar with these people. It had indeed been a long time since she last saw them, but they looked much better than they did at the beginning. Younger Aunt how long has it been since you went back to see grandmother and mother? One of the sisters-in-law looked at Sun Yijia and asked. https://11/118007/10168892. Chapter 454. After Sun Yijia got married, she basically cut off contact with Ding General Manor. She had never relied on her parents' family to support her in her husband's family. If it weren't for the fact that being expelled from the family would be a hindrance to the child and the Luo family's reputation, and if it weren't for the fact that there were one or two people she really cared about in Ding General Manor, she really wanted to completely cut off contact with Ding General Manor. Indeed, Sun Yijia hadn't returned to Duke Dingguo's mansion for several months. However, every time she went back, they parted on bad terms. Old Madame Sun also asked her to live a good life in the Luo family and not get involved in the mess of Duke Dingguo's mansion. However, the one who had been ill was her mother, who gave birth to her and raised her. Although her mother had always been very utilitarian and her daughter was more of a tool, it was an indisputable fact that Sun Yijia had been well educated since she was a child. It was impossible for her to really ignore her mother. Now Ding General Manor was very chaotic. Not to mention the power struggle between the brothers, even Sun Yijia's uncles had become restless and wanted to get a share of the pie. In addition to these, the inner residence was also in a mess. The fight between women was really not much worse than that between men. It was even more insidious and vicious. Only a fool would go to that damn place from time to time to make trouble for himself. When her daughter was 1 year old, she was bullied by her parents' family. They accused her of being unfilial both openly and secretly. Sun Yijia seemed to be in a good mood now, but the premise was that her bottom line was not touched. Don't forget that Sun Yijia could slap those so-called sisters and sisters-in-law at the beginning of her disfigurement. Did they really think that she didn't dare to do it now? Sun Yijia's face was painted with delicate makeup. At this moment, she restrained her smile. Her eyes were cold and inexplicably oppressive, which made the people who provoked her feel a little scared and want to retreat. In such a scene, in addition to those who were worried, there were naturally more people who were happy to watch a good show. After all, Sun Yijia was the object of envy of many women, no matter those married young women or unmarried girls. The former Sun Yijia had a good family background, good learning skills, and good looks, so no one could be jealous of her. However, after her disfigurement, she could still marry so well. Not only did she marry well, but her husband was also devoted to her. Many women wanted to throw themselves at him, but he ignored them and stayed with such an ugly woman. What virtue did Sun Yijia have? She was Sun Yijia's ugly face. How could she still get all the benefits? As such, he was naturally happy to see her being torn apart. It would be even better if her reputation could be ruined and she was divorced by the Luo family. Unfortunately, it was probably just a thought. Third sister-in-law, today, Jingguo's wife, come to my side. Before Sun Yijia could finish her words, Madame Luo's voice rang out. Sun Yijia obediently shut her mouth and retreated to Madame Luo's side, choosing to be a quiet and beautiful woman. Madame Luo leaned on her cane and sat upright. She looked at the people from Ding General Manor with neither joy nor anger, but it made people feel cold. As the saying goes, a married daughter is like spilled water. Even if you are a girl from Ding General Manor, after marrying into the Luo family, you naturally have to abide by the Luo family's rules. However, I wonder which family's married daughter goes back to her parents' home every few days? Let's not talk about other things. Let's talk about you. How many times do you go back to your parents' home in a year? If you can't do something yourself, don't blindly talk about it in other people's homes. Or is it that although you are in your husband's home, you only think about your parents' home? Today is Sister Xian's first birthday. As her aunts, it's fine that you didn't come early to participate in the celebration, but when you came, you acted as if you were ancestors and had no respect for your seniors. This old one wants to go to Ding General Manor and ask the madam of your manor where this rule came from. Ding General Manor is the Empress's family. As the Empress's niece-in-law, don't always do stupid things to tarnish her reputation and hinder her. Old Madame Luo did not hold back at all with her big hats. Sun Yijia's sisters-in-law's faces turned green and white. However, in terms of seniority, Madame Luo was a first-rank honorary madam, and they were nothing. In terms of seniority, Madame Luo and Madame Sun were of the same generation, so they were firmly suppressed. More importantly, if she really went to Ding General Manor, they would definitely be in serious trouble. Her grandmother was a vegetarian and recited Buddhist scriptures in seclusion. No matter how chaotic Ding General Manor was, she ignored it. However, if outsiders came to her, she could definitely kill them as soon as she made a move. They would not have any room to turn over. Therefore, when Madame Luo said this, they did not dare to say a word. You are a guest. Kind guests should be treated kindly, and evil guests should be driven away. You should take care of yourselves. Everyone, please take your seats. Eldest daughter-in-law, pass the word that the banquet will start. Madame Luo did not say anything else, but her meaning was quite obvious. As a married daughter, Jingwan naturally wouldn't intervene because she knew very well that such a small matter wouldn't be difficult for her grandmother. However, the daughters-in-law of Ding General Manor weren't stupid. There was no reason for them to suddenly make things difficult for her grandmother. Jingwan pondered. Could it be that something happened again? Was it some people's conspiracy? Was it purely targeting Sun Yijia? Was it to scheme against the Luo family? Or was it that the ultimate goal was Jin Qin Wang? Jingwan lowered her eyelids, blocking the darkness in the depths of her eyes. Why were there always so many people who refused to stop? You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.